Hi friends, hello, hi, how are you? I hope you guys are having an amazing day today. Today's video is going to be a little bit more like serious. I don't typically talk about, I guess I do talk about serious things, but this one feels really serious and kind of like something I really debated on talking about because there is a minor involved. And if you've watched my channel at all before or any of my previous videos on situations like family vloggers and people who continually use their children for content on YouTube, you'll know that I feel pretty strongly about kids being exploited on YouTube and how I really morally disagree with it. And it's something that in my private life as a social worker, I would love to dedicate my life to working to get kids' rights on the internet. Like, that would be my dream to do. So this particular story and this case was really sad. And as somebody who, if you've never seen me before, I just recently got my degree in social work, and I am currently working towards my master's in social work. So I am a social worker now, and unfortunately know of situations like this and have seen situations like this before. And it's something that I think is very delicate. So I'm going to try to handle this with the most delicacy that I possibly can, while still giving an opinion on this particular situation. But a really important thing to note about this case is that this is just the details of this specific case. Basically what happened, I feel like I should tell you what happened before I give all these disclaimers, but I feel like it's important to note that this is an individualized case, and I am in no way, when I talk about these parents, speaking of every parent who has ever had something happen with adoption where they had to essentially rehome the child. So I'm not speaking about every parent that's ever had to make that decision. I really am just speaking about this case in particular because I think there's added levels to this case that make it particularly heinous. So basically this video is about Myka and James Stauffer, who are basically, they have multiple channels. Myka has her own channel that is kind of like mommy vlogging, and she does cleaning series and she does things like that. She's like organization stuff, but there's a heavy focus on her being a mother and her children. James also has a popular YouTube channel. It's at almost 1 million subscribers, where he does like car detailing, like intense car cleaning. And then they also have a family vlogging channel that currently used to have about 450 videos on it, and now currently has 0 videos on it since a few days before they uploaded the video that we're going to talk about today. Yesterday, Myka uploaded a video to her channel specifically called An Update on Our Family, and it was Myka and Mike discussing the fact that the child they had adopted almost 3 years ago from China, they had decided that he was no longer the right fit for them and that they could not properly give care to him, and so they had decided to essentially, they went back to the adoption agency, got him in the foster care system, and he is now currently in a new home. There was some speculation that he was put into foster care and was not given the guarantee of a new home. So that happens. If you don't know a lot about how the foster care system works, a lot of times kids go into the foster care system because they're looking for permanent homes. That's kind of the end goal, is either you want them to be rehomed with their original parent or you want them to find a new home. But a lot of times kids in foster care end up kind of bouncing around from house to house their whole lives, essentially, and until they, you know, age out of the system at 18. And especially kids with developmental disabilities, which is what this child had, a lot of times they especially are at risk of getting rehomed a lot of times, because that is a challenge for people, and a lot of foster parents just simply don't have the resources to handle that. It was confirmed, at least on Twitter, so I don't know how reliable this is, but I'd like to hope this is true, that the foster family that took this little boy are in the process of legally adopting him fully. So it does seem like he is going to be in a home that is his home from now on. It doesn't seem like he is going to be passed around or bounced around to different foster homes, which to me is at least somewhat of a positive. Basically, they didn't give a lot of details in their video on why they made this decision, but I've watched a lot lot of Myka's mom vlogs and a lot of her updates on the adoption, and she really heavily publicized that she was adopting this child, and it was definitely a main focus of her channel. So I watched a lot of her updates, and it seems like from the start they had a lot of trouble with connecting with their son, and they had a lot of things happen that were kind of unexpected for them. But in all of her update videos, she ends them in a very optimistic manner of, but I love my son and this was the best thing that ever happened to me. It's important to note too that when they got this little boy, they adopted him from China. When they did adopt him, they had 3 children, and now since then, Myka has had a baby and they have 4 children. So they have 3 young children and also an infant child, along with this boy who is now not a part of their family anymore. They did say that professionals are the ones who recommended they do this process. I don't know how much of that I personally believe. I actually called my mom, she was a social worker in a city school district for a very long time, over 20 years, and I asked her about it, and I was like, have you heard of cases like this? And she was like, yes, you know, she's heard of them. They do happen. It does happen where kids form detachment disorders, where kids aren't fully connecting with the people that they were supposed to be connecting with. Like, these types of things do happen, that it is really sad when it happens. I asked her if she had ever heard of a professionally recommending to rehome a child, and she basically said that doesn't really happen. Normally kids end up getting put in like full-time residential facilities if it's a really severe case, or they have one-to-one aides that come in, or those are the types of recommendations. Finding a new family for a child is not typically and kind of backtracking on the adoption is not typically like a recommendation that would happen. But with that being said, this does happen and it is very sad. I personally, with this whole case, saviorism aspect to this whole thing, because I think that is absolutely a prevalent part of this, and also the lack of realism that it is becoming very apparent that the mother and father possessed when going through this adoption process, how they didn't actually know what they were signing up for. They didn't actually realize what they were signing up for, and how they just kind of wanted this picture perfect life with their little adopted child who kind of had a disability but didn't. Now, in order to fully understand this case, I think it's important to note too that when they were trying to adopt this boy from China, they were very open about the adoption process. They talked, Myka especially made tons of videos discussing adoption, discussing how she wanted to adopt, and then when they finally started the process of adopting this child, they did a campaign fundraiser where they had people donate money to help them fund their trip to China so they could go get him, and to help fund all the fees that they were going to have to pay. And they spun it as, we're gonna put all of your names in this baby book, and then when he gets older, he's gonna get to see all of the wonderful people that helped us bring him home. Like, they used their subscribers' money to help fund this. So there's one part in the video where Myka's like, I don't have to be telling anybody this. I don't have to be sharing this information. And like, technically she's correct. She doesn't have to. But when you made the adoption of this child a massive pillar of your channel. His gotcha day video is the most viewed video on their channel with 5 million views, and that is still currently up and monetized. Really, before we even get into the whole thing of him, everything that happened with him, I think we really need to talk about exploitation of situations like this and the way that families use children to get views and get money, and then when they are no longer convenient, things like this now happen. Myka has made a ton of videos discussing her son and the adoption of her son, and talking about what it's like to have an adopted son. And I will note that all of the videos currently on her channel that do discuss her son's adoption and discuss his updates and progress are sponsored content. So she made money from not only the ad revenue, but the sponsorships. And something that really rubbed me the wrong way was in their initial video, they were like, we don't want to discuss too much of this because we don't want to hurt his privacy. We don't want to invade his privacy by talking about the reasons we had for making this decision. We don't want to invade his privacy. We need you guys to respect his privacy. And here's the thing, you took his privacy away. You are the people who did that in the first place. There are updates where she talks about this little boy hitting his sisters and why his siblings didn't like him at first because he would hit them, because he was aggressive. There's videos of her talking about how he had a detachment disorder, which I'll get into her whole thing about that, but how he didn't really like her at first and how that was horrible for her. And there's videos of her discussing all of the different things going on with him developmentally, how he can't speak words yet, how he barely knows any sign language, how many months it took them to teach him one sign, how he, you know, isn't happy for 90% of the day. She disclosed, just in the day that I've been watching her content, I know way more about her son and his struggles than I ever should know as like a person who has no idea who these people are. You, as the parents, when you decided to capitalize off of your son's adoption, capitalize off of him being developmentally delayed, you took his privacy away when you posted those videos like that. So let's get one thing abundantly clear here. His privacy was never their main concern until people were mad at them, and then they wanted to use this as a shield for the decision that they made. They never cared about his privacy in the first place. That made me very angry because I'm getting like way too emotional about this. It just makes me so angry because this little boy never had a chance to consent to this information being online, and now it is. And now that they've decided to backtrack, all of that information is online. The fact that his family abandoned him, basically, is online for the whole world to see, and there's nobody to protect this kid from that because those parents made that decision. In a video titled 5 Things I Didn't Expect about our China adoption, international adoption. It has 272,000 views and it is sponsored. I will say that this is probably the tackiest sponsorship I've ever seen in my entire life because Myka goes on to attribute her bond that she was able to form with her son to the laundry detergent brand that was sponsoring the video. So that's probably the tackiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, just in the first place. The fact that she accredited laundry detergent to being able to form a bond with her son, who was obviously suffering from a detachment disorder.
Another thing I did to try to help our bond was I decided to use Druft baby detergent. I can still feel like I'm snuggling that brand new baby, and I get that baby scent that I never got from my son.
But in the video, she talks about how she did everything that they tell you not to do during an adoption process. She did all of the things that you weren't supposed to do. Her and her husband, when they were deciding to adopt this child, they decided to go the route of a child who has a developmental delay, a child who has like a medical issue, a child who has something essentially that maybe would make it harder for them to be adopted. There are many cases, especially in China, where kids aren't adopted because they have something that would require an extra level of care that a lot of parents just can't do. And frankly, I am so glad for the parents that are honest with themselves and say, I cannot adopt a child who has something like that. I can't provide that, whether it's financially, emotionally. Thank you to those parents for being honest with yourselves. But had Myka been honest with themselves, this whole situation would have been avoided. They went the route of adopting a child who had a developmental disability, and they knew that going into it. They knew that there were things going on with him. They knew his kind of medical history. They knew all these things. I guess he had a piece of his brain that was missing, and there was like a whole bunch of other things going on. In this video, she explicitly talks about the fact that she was not at all prepared to have a son who had developmental delays, despite the fact that she put on her application that she was well prepared to have that. When these adoptions happen, they give you like a list of things that could potentially be wrong, and you have to say what you're comfortable with because adoption is about finding the best fit for you. So when they did that list, they checked off, according to Myka, 99% of the ailments or anything that could be going on with a kid. They checked off 99% of those because she was a nurse, so she thought she could do that. They agreed beforehand to 99% of anything that could ever possibly be wrong with a child. And in this video, she talks about the fact that her way of preparing for having a child could potentially have a developmental delay. Her way of preparing for that was typing into YouTube developmental delays and just watching how children acted on YouTube. That's actually what she says in this video, is how she prepared, was looking up children who have developmental delays. And she watched those videos and thought, well, that's not that hard. That's not that bad. And in her mind, she says in this video is looking back now with the hindsight that we have of what happened, this video is horrifying to watch, because she then talks about how she thought that most kids with developmental delays, it was fairly easy to have them catch up, so they were no longer delayed, but that turned out not to be true. She talked about how her son had a detachment order from the beginning, from basically his entire family, except for the father. She even talks about at one point how she heard of families who would get to China and then stop the adoption process once they met the child because they realized they couldn't do what the child needed them to do, and they stopped that process. And she says in this video, I never understood how people could do that until I was in this position. As if now she understands why people stopped it. It's creepy, honestly, to watch these videos given what happened, because she was basically saying in those videos that things were not going well and things were not progressing the way that she wanted them to, and that she was the one who was underprepared for all of this. Her and her husband were not prepared for this. Adoption is, I shouldn't even have to say this because I know everybody knows this, but adoption is so serious. And I think there is, especially with international adoptions, there can sometimes, not all the time, because I think there are genuinely, like me and my fiance have talked about adoption. We wouldn't want to do an international adoption. We would want to adopt somebody from the United States. We'd probably want to do something like foster care, but we've even talked about, and I think it's important to talk about, if you're going down that path, what is my motivation for doing this? Am I doing this because I think I'm going to swoop in and save this poor child from a life of poverty? If that's the reason you're doing it, stop. And it's really weird watching her videos. She talks about being a mom, and she talks about how amazing it is for her. It's never about helping the kids. When she talks about being a mom, it's how the kids help her, how the kids have helped her grow, how they've made her a better person, which granted, parenting should do that too. But when you're considering adopting somebody, it's not because you want that child to make you feel better. It's not because you want to feel good about yourself for doing it. There are so many things that you have to consider before adopting that I don't think it's talked about enough. I think there are fundamental flaws with the adoption system too, because I think there's not enough reality checks thrown into the adoption process. I've never gone through it. I've looked into it before and like looked into what the process is, but especially with international adoptions, I don't think there's enough reality checking happening with these parents. In this particular case, it appears, based on the evidence provided and based on their videos on the topic, that they wanted a son who had something going on, but that wouldn't be too inconveniencing for them and their family. It feels like she, especially because the way she talks about adoption, she wanted the aesthetics of what an adoption could bring. Also, I don't know how real this is, so I'm hesitant to mention it, but I've seen on social media there's been some evidence that the mother was duct taping her son's thumbs to get him to stop sucking his thumb, and using that as a preventative measure to try and get him to stop sucking his thumb. I don't know how real that is. I don't know how true that is, but I do feel like it's worth mentioning that it apparently, to some people who were avid watchers of the channels before they took down all the videos, they did see slight signs of some behavior that was not appropriate. I think what makes me so sad about the whole thing is that at the end of the day, as much as we're gonna hate on the parents and everything, at the end of the day, nothing that I can say will stop the pain and the trauma that this child is going to experience as a result of this. There's nothing anybody can say or do that's going to prevent that from happening, because it's already happened. The process of switching families, especially after you think your family is your forever family, especially at such a young age, especially with developmental delays, the process of that is going to irreversibly traumatize this child. And the fact that it is all on the internet as a result of these parents' choices, the fact that it's all on the internet for him to watch when he is older, it makes it even sadder to me. I truly and honestly, like, I'm not like a big prayer. I don't pray a lot, but I truly prayed for this kid last night because I was like, man, I just so hope. Why am I getting emotional? I don't know why. I think it just makes me so sad. That everything about this situation makes me sad. Is like, I truly hope that I hope and pray that he is in a situation now where he is with a family who is realistic about what they can handle as a family, who knows what they can handle as a family, who's going to treat him as if he is a biological child. Because if one of their biological children had developmental delays, they wouldn't have even, there'd never be even be a thought in your brain to put that child into the foster care system. I think a big problem is if the wrong people adopt someone and they know they have that way out in the back of their head, they take it. And that's not to say there's not existing challenges that come with adoption that don't happen when you have a biological child, but it is to say if you are the right person to be adopting in the first place, usually those types of situations don't have to happen. I don't know if this is the case in all places, but I'm pretty sure in some places, if you do have to like retroactively stop an adoption, I'm pretty sure you aren't allowed to adopt again in the future. And I hope that's the case for them, because it's very apparent to me that they were not adopting for the right reasons, just given all of the information that's out there. She literally says in videos that she thought they were just going to automatically all click as a family and be this big happy family together that was going to have very few issues. She talks about that was her expectation, which going into something as serious as an adoption that can have so many hiccups, with that being your expectation, shows me that she was not doing it because she was being realistic about the process. Was like, she was doing it for whatever white savior complex reasons she was doing it for. I also hope from this experience, I know this is not going to happen, but I genuinely and truly hope that they just stop putting their children on the internet. I think it is just, this is a much bigger conversation to be had, but I think the act of putting your children on the internet in the way that these family vloggers do is so exploitative. The only reason that her channel took off and started growing was because she started this adoption series. Most viewed videos on her channel are regarding her son that she adopted or her other 4 children. A lot of people when I make these videos are like, oh, well, the parents get to, you know, have control over the kids. The parents get to consent. Okay, sure, they do, like legally right now, yeah, that's the case, but like there's nothing to protect these children right now. That's the bigger problem, is that they legally are allowed to do things like this. They are legally allowed to share intimate details of a child's life, and he has no say in the matter. He has no say on if millions of people get to see that information about him. And a lot of people say, well, what about child actors? Child actors have a union that protects them, that protects their money, that makes sure they're being compensated for their work. The child actors are not portraying or playing themselves. They're playing a character. Can you imagine going into school, into middle school, and your mom videotaped and put on YouTube for 1.2 million people, you learning to get potty trained for the first time, and all of your classmates can see that, and you had no say whatsoever? If you approved that to be out there, this kid is probably going to have what happened with this family follow him for the rest of his life and has no say in the matter because his parents decided to take that decision away from him. These situations do happen. They are horribly sad. They're horrific for the children. A lot of times they're horrific for the parents. I believe that this is a horrific experience for them. Like, I do believe that. But when you make the active decision to take away your child's privacy and profit directly off of him and his story, you don't get to turn around and cry because you're getting hate comments from people, because it really does look like you just used him for your videos and then it got rid of him when it wasn't convenient for you anymore. That's truly what it looks like. You don't get to sit there and cry because people are mad at you about that. I very rarely am like, I hope you quit YouTube. I hope you stop. But at the very least, I hope you never put any of your children on YouTube again. And I hope this has been a learning experience for other family vloggers. You cannot put your children in positions like this. You cannot use them as cash cows and then just get rid of them when it's not convenient for you anymore. You cannot use your child's developmental delays as clickbait for a YouTube channel. It's not appropriate. I got really mad. I am still mad about the situation. This situation makes me very sad. I really genuinely, in the comments, if I see anybody sending threats to these people, I'm deleting the comment. I'm so sorry, but like, you can't do that. This will not be a space for that. However, if you want to leave, if you want to just talk about the situation, that's fine. I'm just saying, especially when they have kids, I know they opened themselves up to this, but sending them threats is never the answer. I genuinely hope they don't ever put their children on YouTube again, and I genuinely hope that this little boy is okay from all of this. Stop subscribing to family channels and making them famous, please. I love you guys so much. My normal outro like just does not feel appropriate, so just please register to vote. You know, use your voice in a positive way, wear a mask in public. I love you guys. Thank you for watching this mess of a video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!